Hello everyone, this is Preeti Rani Rajvanshi, Assistant Professor in IMS Noida, School of IT, and today we'll discuss about the constructor in C++. So in last class we have discussed about the classes and objects. So when we talk about classes and objects, there is a very important and very foremost topic is all about the constructor. So what is constructor? So when we talk about constructor, the constructor is a special member function of any class. Special member function because the name of that member function will be same as the class name. If you have a class name like student, then the member function, or you can say constructor, will be student only. Then constructor will be called by the compiler at the time when the object is created. By default it is created, it is called by the constructor. So when we talk about constructor initializes the value to object members after storage is allocated to the object, because as we understand in the previous classes that there is no memory for the class. Class object will have a memory so that we can get access to the member functions and data members of the class, and they will get the memory in the they'll get the space in the memory. So we understand the basic syntax first. So as you can see in the slide rightmost to me, like we have a class called A and we have a constructor with the A. So this is the part which will be accessed by the which will be initialized, or you can say called when the object initialized in the main function. So if we use a public access specifier and use a variable x, integer variable, so when we define this we gave this x a value 1. Okay, so when we call it the constructor definition, so constructor declaration will be inside of the class, and you can define that constructor outside the class, as we can do in the member functions with the scope resolution operator. So what is the way to write the class name, scope resolution operator, and the function name and the function braces. Then there are three types of constructor. One is default constructor, second is parameterized constructor, and third is copy constructor. So what is default constructor? Default constructor is the constructor which doesn't take any argument and it has no parameters. Okay, so there is no return type of constructor. This is the main thing, that whenever we write any member function, we write void main or void add, void something, the function name and return type. There is no return type of any constructor, because the constructor are the majorly used for the values, or you can say the functionality that is that we want at the time of object instantiation, or you can say initialization in the creation in the main method. Okay, so when we talk about default constructor, say for example I have given a code like class. There is a class called cube, and we have applied a side variable and a cube name constructor, as name should be same as class, and I have passed side value is 10, and I want to print the side value outside the main function. Then I will call cube C, that means cube object C, and I'll call C dot side, so that will print in the C out the value is 10. Okay, in this case, as the object is created, the constructor is called, which initializes its data member. A default constructor is so important for initialization of object members that even if we do not define a constructor, explicitly, the compiler will provide a default constructor implicitly. So in the last class we have worked upon a class called calc, and we didn't make any constructor. So at the background, at the compiling stage, compiler will create a calc named constructor, and at the time of when we initialize our object in the main function, and it will give the procedure like just to instantiate the value. So if we don't write about the definition of that cube that we did in the previous program, side is equal to 10, and we don't want to use that thing in the system. So and we will call c dot side, same method in the previous. So it will give you the output 0 or any random value, because the default constructor is created at the time of object instantiation and creation, and at the time of thing it will generate a random value because we didn't provide any value to the constructor. Then we have parameterized constructor. As we have parameterized function, we have parameterized function constructor as well. There are the constructors with parameters. Using this constructor, you can provide different values of data to data members of different objects by passing the appropriate values as argument. Okay, so if we talk about the same program like cube, and we have public, integer, side. So side we have defined as a public data member and the integer type. Then we have cube, and parameter we have passed parameter int x. Okay, so side is equal to x we have defined, and we will call it in the main function. So in the main function we will call cube. Say for example, first object is c1 and we pass 10. Then cube dot c2, cube c2, and we pass the parameter 20, or cube c3 and we pass parameter 30. And when we call it at the printout in the print time in the cout, so it will print c1 dot side, c2 dot side, c3 dot side. What it will give the output? 10, 20 and 30. So we can provide a single variable different values at the time of object creation with the help of parameterized constructor. By using parameterized constructor, in this case we have initialized 3 objects with user defined values, and we can have any number of parameters in the constructor. Then we have a third type of constructor, that is copy constructor. These are special type of constructor which takes an object as an argument, and it used to copy values of data members of one object into another object. We will study copy constructor in details. Okay, so in the next class. Now we will discuss about the constructor overloading in C++. So when we talk about overloading, that means we want to use same thing in the different ways. So if we create default constructor, parameterized constructor with a single parameter, with two parameter and the same name as the class, that is the constructor overloading. So as this in this program you can see in the right side, we have a class called student, and we have 2 arguments, roll number and name. Okay, then I have created first constructor, that is student with one parameter int x. That means I am going to enter or user defined value in the x value. Okay, then I define roll number is equal to x, name is equal to none. Then I declared second constructor, that is student with 2 parameters int x and string str. Then I created roll number is equal to x and then name is equal to str. Then I called it in the main function, and when I called it in the main function, it will call at the time of object creation. So say for example, I write student s1 within bracket, I didn't give anything, then it will call the default constructor. I didn't make anything, but then it will give you the 0 output or any random value. Then I have created second thing, that is student s2, and I have given in a bracket, that is 10. That means the roll number is 10 and the value name value will be none. So that it will print 10 and none. Then in the third value, next constructor will be 2 parameterized constructor, in which I pass one is the roll number and second one is the name. So at that time it will called at the time of instantiation at the object creation, and it will give you the output like when you call with the S1 and one value, then it will call a single parameter constructor. Then you will call 2 parameterized constructor with 2 values, it will give you the second constructor output. Okay, thank you. So this is all about the constructor. So now as we discussed in the last classes about the classes and object constructor, now it's a topic is called destructor. So what is destructor? When we talk about constructor, it will created at the time of, it will be called at the time of when we create the object. So when we create the object, it will store in a memory, and it will hold a memory in the in your system. So when we call about destructor, so destructor is going to destroy the object as soon as the scope of object ends. That means if I created an object for student class in the class, and I want that object to be end at the time of when the work of that object is done, so I will use the destructor. Destructor is the same as constructor with a tilde sign. Tilde sign used in front of that constructor, so that that particular object will free the memory at the time of when the object ends. The destructor is a special class function which destroy the object as soon as the scope of the object ends. The destructor is called automatically by the compiler when the object goes out of the scope. The syntax is you can use the class A. Say for example you have created class A and you have created a constructor called A. Okay, then you can create a destructor with the tilde sign in front of that constructor, and that is the destructor of that particular class. Destructor will never have any argument. There is no type of destructor, though parameterized, it will be a default destructor every time without any argument, without any return type. And when we see the relationship between the constructor and destructor, constructor used when we provide something to the data members and we want to change these values at the time of object instantiation, and then we want to free the memory, then we use the object with the constructor with the tilde sign, that is called the destructor, that will free the memory. So we have a program, you can see here, we create a program with the name class A, and I have created a constructor, default constructor. So I gave it a cout value, that is a statement constructor called, and I created a same destructor with a tilde sign, and I called the I gave the statement destructor called. Then in the main function I have created an object of class A, that is obj1. Then I have used a value int value x and given a value 1. Then I have given a condition like if x, that means if 1, then A object 2, that means constructor is called, and by default I have created the destructor. Then once the object work is done, the scope is ended, the destructor will be called at the same time. Okay, so when an object is created, the constructor of that class is called. The object reference is destroyed when its scope ends, which is generally after the closing curly braces for the code block in which it is created. The object obj2 is destroyed when the if block ends, because it has created inside the if block, and the object obj1 is destroyed when the main function ends. Okay, so if we talk about single definition for both default and parameterized constructor, we discussed in the last class. So we can give an example like this. I have created a class called dual, and I have given constructor dual with the parameter one parameter of integer type, and I have passed a data member of integer type. Then I called excuse me, then I use it in the main, and dual obj1, I have created obj1, and then I created dual obj2 and pass a value like 10, 20, whatever you want to print, and at that time it will give you the output. And in this program, a single constructor definition will take care for both these objects, because when we talk about default constructor, it will already created by the compiler if you don't make it defined in the class. So both the object initialized and constructor called will be default constructor will be automatically added. We don't need to separate default and parameterized constructor separately. So we discussed about the constructor, classes, object, default constructor, then types of constructor, default constructor, copy constructor, we'll discuss it later, and then parameterized constructor. So when we talk about the destructor will help constructor to free the memory. Okay, so when object work is done, then it is end up the memory, and it will free it. So in the nutshell, if you want to understand the basics of constructor and destructor, so constructor is like a special class function. Constructor calls whenever an object is created. Constructor have no return value. Constructor have can be parameterized. Constructor have default constructor can be called and created by the compiler at the time of object instantiation. Now come to destructor. Destructors are the same as constructor. Constructor have same name as class. Destructor also have same name as a class. Constructor and destructor have different thing in the instantiation, like when you initialize constructor, so constructor in destructor, the same constructor can be copied and with the tilde sign. Tilde sign, that means you have to clear the memory. Okay, then you talk about the types of destructor. There is no type of destructor, because destructor is just a destructor without any parameter to free the memory which is allocated or assigned by the at the time of object creation when constructor is called. Okay, so when we talk about the scope of object is all about the scope of that particular class in the main function. So when main function ends, it will end up the scope of that particular object. So with the help of these programs, you will be able to understand the part of that constructor and destructor in the detail. And thank you so much.